Hello, welcome, fellow travelers to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm your host, Sam, and I am joined by the one and only Caitlin Bassett. Caitlin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so pumped.
I know, me too. It's really good to see you.
You as well. You as well. It's
Yeah,
been too long,
I know.
way too long, but I'm glad that we can at least meet before, what do we have, 7 coming out?
That's
Halfway
right.
through the season.
I know. Yeah. Well, which is interesting because one of the things that I've been saying recently after I reviewed episode 6, 6 kind of just kind of felt like this exhale, which I felt like came at the perfect time with the tentative agreement in place and the strike ending. It was just sort of like, what a perfect time to have an episode like this where we get to sort of just exhale before the next stuff sort of happens. Did it feel
Mhm.
that way to you at all? Like, even, I mean, probably while filming, probably not, right? Because things were just like going.
Yeah.
But now, does it maybe feel that way in retrospect a little bit?
I don't know, maybe a bit. Like, honestly, it just felt like I did episode 1 and then I did episode, you know, 8. Like, it was, I just can't.
Yeah.
It felt like one giant cannonball of a production.
Right.
Um, so like I do feel now in my life, now that the strike is kind of ended and we're going back and I'm seeing scripts and you know what I mean? It's starting to feel
Yeah.
really good. And I feel like now is Caitlin can kind of, okay, like let's go finish this season. You know what I mean? It's really exciting, but there was a lot, it was very touch and go there for a minute.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that's got to be kind of incredible about it all is that you basically did 26 episodes in a row, or well, 25. I guess there was a break between like episode 1 and but you did reshoots for the pilot. So yeah, it's
No, it
basically
was
you did like,
26. We did
yeah,
26 episodes. Yeah,
you
we did
basically just like
reshoots for that pilot, like almost a
26.
week of them.
Yeah. So yeah, 26 episodes in a row, like, no break whatsoever. Um, what was that like?
Honestly, it was like a deployment.
Mm,
Like, honestly, like it's the closest thing I've ever had to a deployment. Now, I'm not saying like it's as hard, you know what I mean? You're not getting
sure, of
shot at.
course.
I'm eating great. Lots of people are helpful. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's not the same. But just in terms of like hours worked, it is a bit similar. I have some similarities. I feel like I leaned on my deployment experience and my military training the most when I've been shooting this, just in terms of stamina,
Mm,
um, and showing up. Like you might be exhausted, but we're gonna show up having a great day.
right.
There's gonna be a
Yeah.
smile on my face, and I'm gonna make sure that my energy's right so that it's not messing up your energy. We can get through this day. Um,
Oh, yeah, I could only imagine.
right. So it was a beast, but also like the joy of a lifetime.
Yeah.
With amazing people, and it just got so exciting and it's so different, especially from season 1 to season 2. And I mean, I no complaints, no complaints. I'm so excited to go back.
Speaking of like going straight from season 1 to season 2, when you found out about the plans for season 2 and the 3-year gap and, Ben and Addison splitting up and everything, and Addison getting a new boyfriend,
Hmm.
what were your feelings? What were your thoughts?
uh, uh well, I was so excited for the 3-year time jump because I feel like I was like, oh, I see what they're doing. They're going to change the structure of the show
Hmm.
just enough to make sure that we can start to weave in these other things, because where the pilot of the first season put us was right when the house was just lit on fire, right? Ben had leapt. We didn't know why the house was on fire. And when the house is on fire, it doesn't leave a lot of space to, you know what I mean, get to know some of these characters. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think that made sense to launch us into this show, launch us into the leaps, because the leaps have to be, they are the show.
Yeah.
Um, but now that, we understand the leaps, we understand how they work, we understand how the science has evolved. Uh, we understand how this show's kind of structured now. I love that they did that. I was like, oh, what a smart way to move us forward and get us to play like, oh, who are we? Who are we outside of this? Where
Hmm.
were we when this wasn't an option anymore? That I think, I mean, was a stroke of brilliance by
Yeah.
Martin and Dean. I was a little scared uh, because I was like, okay, oh, we've moved on. Um, People tend not to be very forgiving of that.
Yeah.
And so, but I think, and to be in my character's corner about it, like it's been 3 years and she did everything she could. I mean,
Yeah.
short of taking her own life, essentially. Even and she even kind of tried to do that when she tried to launch herself into the accelerator.
Right.
Was just, I'll do anything to try and get him back, get me there, whatever. Um, and you know, it was gone. Like there was no option. So when there's no option, no matter how tragic something was, you have to kind of move forward in your life or quit. That's the two options. And I don't think Addison's a quitter.
Right.
I think she would have gone out in a burning flame before she just walked away.
Yeah.
So I think she fought her way through like she always does, but that had to be to fight for her own life to a certain extent. So, I'm in her corner, but I was a little nervous. But I think they've handled it really well, and I really appreciate, what they gave me in 4 to finally argue my case back and be like,
Yeah.
okay, I know you're mad, and that's legitimate because of where you are in this journey. But let me explain what happened while you were sleeping. Like some things have happened that you need to be aware of, right? So I think I'm really grateful for that opportunity for my character.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because Lonely Hearts Club, it's hard to pick a single out an episode thus far in the first 6 as a favorite, but that one felt like such a high point for me because it really, it felt like the emotional climax of all of the stuff that had been going on for the previous 3 episodes, and certainly after seeing in Closure Encounters Ben's reactions to Addison and getting short and getting snippy and ignoring her
Mhm.
and all that sort of stuff, to kind of have that in the 4th episode, it felt like such a high point. And I felt like the work that you and Ray did in that specific scene that you were talking about, where you tell him that you almost jumped into the accelerator. I mean, legitimately, I was pretty blown away. I thought it was just the best, the best work that I had seen you do, and I just, it made me cry 3 times, and so so I
Okay,
just
sorry.
no, it was necessary, clearly. But yeah, I just loved it so much, and so I to kind of echo what you were saying, I think that it gave you as an actor, but the show in general, a great opportunity to really get more into these characters, who these people are, what they want, what they're fighting for, what this is all about. And it's been such a wonderful journey filming that scene.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious because I know when I had Eliza on last week, she was talking about working. Yes, is great.
She's so good, and she's
um
so wonderful.
but she mentioned kind of rehearsing the one scene where Ben reveals that he's a time traveler to her, almost like it was a play, like the two of them kind of rehearsing that scene. I'm just curious, like, what was that like for you and for Ray in that particular moment? Did you rehearse it in that same way? Was it just more like you just did it? What went into that?
Yeah, honestly, that one we did. And it was one of the first times I've ever stayed away from Ray on set. I
Mm,
actually, and he knew I was doing it, and he very respectfully gave me space to do it. And it wasn't to work up emotion. It was just because there was something I had to stay mad enough to let it loose at that, you know what I mean, at that
yeah.
character. I had to really live in how much of a jerk he'd been to me for a couple episodes, which again, understandably, which is why in those episodes, you still had those kid gloves on a little bit where I was like, I was just kind of taking it. Um, but I think we'd had a season and some change to gear that up. So, different between Ray and Eliza, they had just started working together and
Sure.
so they were still kind of creating what that was going to be. But for me, we did the lines and then I just stayed away from him. I say it on the opposite side of like holding. I didn't chat with him, which is very weird for me. I am a chatter, if you can't guess that. And so is Ray. And 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 it was so interesting. I didn't have to explain it to him. Was never like, "Are you okay?" Or like, you know what I mean? He
Yeah.
knew it was for the scene, and I knew it was for the scene. And then I think we only honestly did it 2 or 3 times. Um, maybe a little bit more for coverage, but the big part a couple
Yeah.
times. It was freezing that day, which I know in LA is a sliding scale, but um, it was legitimately very cold, and under camera my leg was shaking, but it was
Oh
like
my gosh.
I was so upset and trying to bottle that into something that wasn't like unmitigated anger. It's that anger that you feel when you love someone and you're so tired of their crap.
Mm.
And you're like, I know why you're hurt, but let me explain where I was for a second. Like, can you stop thinking about yourself for a second? Because I've thought about you for years and all I do is think about you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was a rough episode to shoot, if I'm being honest. And there was that day, and then the last scene of that episode too. Uh, we didn't love it. It like
Mm.
just Ray and Caitlin as friends. It was just tough, but Ray and Caitlin as actors, it was great.
Yeah. Well, another one of my favorite scenes, not to make it all about that episode, but another one of my favorite scenes from that episode, it's funny because you and Ray don't actually speak much in it at all. And it's the scene where, oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name and I feel awful because she was wonderful. But the woman that played Tim Matheson's co-star on the TV show that they
Oh,
were in,
she was great.
when she kind of gives Tim that monologue, she's like, "Are you okay?" And like as soon as she asked him that, like I started to get, I was so emotional because I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is making me feel all sorts of things." But there was this wonderful moment where the kudos to the camera and the director, but like
MJ, she's
it
so
was
good.
lovely because it was like Tim was in the foreground, we were
Mhm.
looking at his face, but you could see, your face and Ray's face at the same time. And it was really, really beautiful just clocking those reactions. Um, just out of curiosity, in a scene like that, do you find doing that where you're just listening, right? And you're just actively listening. Do you find that to be harder or just part of the work in the same way as the previous scene we were talking about, or easier? I'm curious.
I think it depends. I think in a scene like that where I mean, you could listen to it 50 times and it would still break your heart. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I'm like, well, I'm not doing the work here. I'm just listening. You
Yeah.
know, sure, there's sometimes you have to maybe muscle it up a bit, or, we've done this 10 times and, the story's losing a
Sure.
little bit of juice. Uh, it's something, you know what I mean? But no, that one was easy. I mean, there's just some actors that you can't. I remember this is a bit of a deep cut for the show, but episode 103,
Mm-hmm.
John, who
Mm,
played, uh, I cried at his rehearsal
mm,
of when he starts that monologue about having PTSD and nobody caring about, because my dad had very bad, PTSD from
mhm.
Vietnam. And I was like, oh, I, I might cry right now. Like I was like, oh, that's exactly what it is. He
Yeah.
nailed it. And we were just rehearsing. He was at 70%. But you know, it's just I was like, "Oh, I have to keep it together, actually."
Yeah.
I have to listen less because if I listen 100, I'm just gonna be crying the whole time.
Right, right. Well, I mean, yeah, that John is obviously probably one of my favorite guest stars that you all have had. I just think that, and somebody up there like Ben, that I'm on the record of saying this multiple times. That was the episode where things really started to coalesce for me, especially with Ben, like seeing Raymond like really get Ben, and that moment in like the jail cell when, Ben is like fighting for, John. It's just this lovely moment where it's like, yeah, that's my leaper. Like that's exactly,
Yeah.
what I want. And from the show. And to see more of that, as it's gone on, has been so satisfying. But I just thought that there have been some lovely moments, and again, going back to one of your first comments about just how the 3-year gap opened things up so much. I'm curious, like back at the project, and this is actually, we took some questions
Ooh,
from Twitter
that's a
and
question.
Instagram, and so this is a
I
perfect
love that.
time to throw one of those at you.
Heck yeah.
because the relationships that we kind of saw, in the first season have clearly like continued for that 3-year gap. So I'm interested in hearing, kind of like if you all have done like any work, you just talking about what might have happened during that time, or is it just kind of a case like we got what we got on the page and we're just going to go in there and we're going to, tell the truth, and the rest will follow. And then I'll get to this Instagram question, but that's kind of my first question. Like, as far as like any sort of like background work that you all have done, on your own to kind of fill in that gap, or if you're just kind of waiting to take the lead of the writers.
Oh no, we talked about it. I mean, the writer, I think Dean and Martin led that correctly though. They kind of gave us the background and then we filled in. And it really felt like the first year after Ben didn't come back, it was basically what you saw the first season, but without the leaping. And a lot more frustration and a lot more like, why isn't this working? And we're in there all the time. And Ian's trying every smart person thing that they can. And I'm, shaking every tree around the government and, trying to just figure out. And so is Magic. And it's just not working. And the frustration of that, and at what point do the dominoes fall of who fell first? Who was like, I don't think this is, and who fell last? And I think all of us can answer that for ourselves. I don't think we need necessarily to have a consensus. But I do think Addison was probably one of the last to fall. And it probably was in the flame of trying to jump in. There was probably a bit of a psych arrest. I probably spent a few days in a place heavily. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it went there.
Yeah.
And then how the relationship shift, you become a different person. There was a lot more drinking. And sometimes when you go through things like this, for a while you hold on and then you start to have to just move away. So I think by the end, and I think we all agreed on this, by the end, we were really only seeing each other once every few months. I think like Jen and Magic saw each other maybe a bit more.
Yeah.
But I think Addison in particular just really started to have to walk away because they were just the life she couldn't have anymore. And she started a new one,
Right.
With a person. Probably where this question's going.
We'll definitely talk about that. Actually, it's not, believe it or not, but it ties into sort of what you're talking about there. Because Aya, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Aya, over on Instagram, asked that they wanted to hear more about the Ian and Addison relationship, and certainly there have been a couple of moments in recent episodes, One Night in Koreatown being a great example, where the two of you, have these really wonderful moments. And I would just love to hear, your perspective on that relationship, maybe where it is now, no spoilers, but where it might go, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ian and Addison have always had that, sibling, just like we bully each other in the way that we can because Ian's significantly smarter than me, but I can go outside and not burn up like a vampire, like so like,
That's awesome.
you know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
they're just that will always exist. And Mason constantly reminds me of that when they get away with any line they want in the room, and I'll just sit there with being the straight man. I'm like, okay, thanks for that. I don't even need to be in this scene. We don't even turn the cameras around. Just let's just move on. But that relationship is just so much fun to play because it just always feels like coming home. The characters have no, I don't even want to say competition. Like they're just so different, but they're similar in the fact that they just care so much. So I mean, I love the Mason scenes. They're always fun and funny and heartwarming, and also Mason could have chemistry with a toothpick. So like they're just so amazingly present and generous as an actor, which I'm eternally grateful for. So
Absolutely.
it's I think that relationship, the one probably who kept calling even though Addison stopped texting back was Ian
Mm,
the most. I think Magic probably gave some space. I think Jen definitely gave some space because Jen gets it. Jen
yeah.
gets having a, and Jen did kind of have to go into your own hole. But I think Ian kept calling.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, one of the things that really kind of helped to coalesce that relationship for me as a viewer was in Let Them Play. There's the scenes that the two of you shared in that episode. And then of course at the end when you invite them into the imaging chamber with you. I mean, it's just there was so much about that episode that kind of helped to explain what these two people mean to one another, and to see it followed up on in such nice ways, although at the same time you haven't had a ton of time together, but in One Night in Koreatown in particular, I thought that scene was just really lovely. And yeah, I mean they're fantastic and I love watching them, but
Always.
yeah, I mean the relationships that that Addison clearly has with these other people, like you said, I mean it's changed just due to this being apart. How do you feel about, I mean, just from an actor's perspective, from a character's perspective, whatever perspective you want, the fact that everyone has been so supportive of the relationship with Tom, as we get that kind of said to us numerous times, Jen, Magic, everyone
Yeah.
seems very supportive of the fact that Addison moved on.
I think, I mean, I'm not sure if you've watched somebody go through like a brutal divorce or even worse, like lose their spouse, but I think, after you watch that, regardless of who was at fault or, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if when you saw somebody give everything they had and it failed to save their life, to save the marriage, and then they are who they are after that, which is often not a great version of themselves. It's a bit of a husk. And then you see them start to wake back up. I mean, I don't care if it's because they're into badminton, you're going to be supportive of it. You're like,
Yeah.
is anything putting life back into your eyeballs? That makes you want to get up in the morning. And I think Tom did that. I think at first in a friendship way. I think he has, he understands loss.
Right.
He understands that in a very intimate way. He understands not having your life pan out how you thought. And I think we started working together and reconnecting as work colleagues again. And then eventually, after a long while, I allowed that to change. Um, but in a way, there's a lot of I love that the Quantum family is supportive because I think they're supportive because they know Tom helped bring Addison back to life,
Yeah.
even though they couldn't bring Ben back. Um, so I think that's really where that comes from. And I do think, now that we're talking about him, I'll just add this as well. I think the Tom relationship is so different from the Ben relationship because I feel like Ben and Addison dreamed together.
Mm.
They were on this crazy program. They were going to go get Sam Beckett back. They were going to change the world for the better. And when you dream like that, when you're excited like that, the energy that you bring to those sort of things, it's almost childlike, but it's also this special thing in life that you just hope you get little glimpses of, a couple times throughout your
Yeah.
lifetime. And Ben and Addison had that together. But then when life falls apart and when things don't go well, um, there's other relationships that form. People who understand darkness and loss, and you can create this different sort of relationship that is much more based on a mutual understanding of how the world really works. Um, and you don't always have to dream. And I know it's a little sad and dark, but it's like sometimes you have to put away childish things. And Quantum Leap, I think, was one of the things Addison had decided to put away when
Mm.
she really allowed her and Tom to move forward. And then, of course, Quantum Leap came back.
uh I mean, you practically took my breath away. What a stunningly beautiful answer, honestly, to those questions. Because I how that can't resonate with anyone, and it's so evident in the work that's happening. I mean, it's just I love that answer. So thank you for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
So since I don't have anything else to say right now, let's move on to another question.
Yeah.
This is from Lexi over on Twitter. She asked, what's been your favorite part about filming season 2?
Okay. When is this podcast coming out?
That's a yes. This will come out before 7 or 8 air, so only the first 6 can be included in the answer.
Okay, I'm only going to include the first 6 then, because there's more very exciting things. I mean, it's still hard to explain, but first of all, I loved seeing a bit of who Addison was outside of Ben, because I think the first season ended up a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
For a good reason. It's called Quantum Leap, and he's the one leaping. So it's not
But it
called
was
Quantum
supposed to
Leap.
be you, though. So
I know. Thank you. That's right. So, but I loved episode 202. I loved being outside of HQ, not in the leap. I loved my reaction being like, hold on, I have a life happening now. Like, we don't just drop things all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I thought some of that was some of my strongest work, and also some of the most fun I've had, because she operated alone. She is who she is. So some of that was really fun. I have loved the addition of um, Eliza and Peter. I mean, just even on set, you know what I mean? They're just really lovely to have, really talented actors. So that's just been a really cool addition. And I also think
Yeah.
it's done more fun things for the show.
Absolutely.
And then truthfully, to round that answer out, sorry, Lexi, you get 3 for the price of 1. I loved the time she finally got to take her kid gloves off. And her and Addison and Ben, I think, in the fight, got to have the first 100% honest, amnesia-free, no kid gloves, like, here's how things are now. And we're here tragically for a lot of things outside of your control, but first and foremost for something that was in your control. You chose this. You did this to us, and you left me first. So I appreciated it, because there was a lot of season 1, he didn't remember something.
Right.
How are you angry at somebody who can't even remember what you're angry about them for? And they were doing it to try and help you, but in this way that was like, that was a choice. So, it really shifted the paradigm, and it broke open a lot of what we've been able to do. Also, I love that they're using the cast in the leaps differently. I think that's so
Yeah.
strong for the show.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's been a lot of fun to see that. And you mentioned 202. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, I'm asking lots of actory questions, but one of the things I wanted to ask you about is that there's this wonderful moment that really stood out to me, where you're watching the screen and, we see Ben's face, and Ben is clearly like scared and rattled because Addison's not there. And there's something about that scene, and I wonder, if it was intentional or not, where it just feels like I'm seeing two people who are connected in spite of not being in the same room with one another, in spite, and it was pretty powerful for me. So I'm just curious about, how intentional that was, if that was something that you felt in doing it, or if that's just what I happen to take from it.
No, I mean, I can't remember. I think they showed me the footage. I think they showed me what he looked like. And I'm going to give Ray a lot of the credit here, because what he gave in that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think I played off of it. And if I didn't, it was something similar. Maybe like they told me what he was supposed to be doing. And I guess I just knew him enough. Like, I honestly can't remember. But, I was looking at nothing. You know what I mean? I was looking at
Yeah.
one of the server things, as like an eye line of somebody put a piece of tape there for me. So, but I don't know. I think we'd created quite a relationship, over season 1, and I think you just have to look at somebody who you miss and can't believe is alive, but can't help. You know, there's just, I don't
Yeah.
know how to explain it, but it cut together very well.
Yeah, yeah, no, it really did, because it's evident from both sides, right? You know, that's the thing, is it's like, you know, you get this look of Ben, and he's like looking around, you know, as if like, where, you know, where is she? Why isn't she here? And then we see, you know, you looking at that, and it worked so incredibly well. It was a really,
Yeah,
really great moment.
worked
Um,
out good. That one
yeah,
worked out
yeah,
good.
yeah, good work.
Sometimes it worked out good.
And of course, you know, the end of that episode, when, you know, when Ben finds out that you've moved on, I mean, I've said this before, but Ray's reaction to that is just so incredibly heartbreaking. I mean, it's probably one of the finest just moments of just simple, pure heartbreak I've ever seen. You know, that's not too much. It was so beautiful.
No,
And I just slays me.
it hurts me. I was like, why did you move on?
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I know, right? That's got to be the difficult thing in some ways too, right? Is to, you know, and it's a testament again just to the work that everyone's doing, because you get this 3-year time gap, but it's not like you went away for a few months, you know, and had this break between seasons. You just had to get right back in there after having done season 1 and do this. So the fact that it's worked so well, and it comes across in the performances, is really pretty remarkable, because it has got to be hard to, I imagine, stay across from someone that you have developed this relationship with, this, you know, professional but personal as well, and then of course thinking about it in terms of the characters, and to just see this awful place where, especially where he has been for at least half of this season so far. Sometimes you got to walk out of there and feel a little afterwards, right?
Wow. Yeah, it adds some feelings for sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't always feel good. Um, it doesn't feel good to, you know, hurt the character your friend plays. I don't know how to
Yeah,
explain it any more than that. Like,
sure.
it's just, I know it's removed and we're all acting, but like you're playing hurt and I can see it and it hurts me.
Right.
It's a weird, I think, you know, I think our worst day on set was, um, it was in episode 4, and it was when he tells me he doesn't want me to be his
Mm,
hologram anymore. Both of us, I can't explain it. We just walked away like,
mm.
all right, bye, friend. I'll see you when I see you. It was
Oh
like there, because
no.
you know, you don't know exactly when that's working out. So,
Yeah.
um, there was this, you know, little goodbye and I'll see you when I see you. That was real.
Mm. Yeah, that sucks. So, um, I'll jump to another question here. This is from Oddly Specific with Audra, and she asked, Caitlin, if in Quantum Leap's off time you had your pick to do any series, any role, what would you choose? Any dream role you've always wanted to try, or any series you just want to pop on for a stint?
Oh God, probably Lord of the Rings. I'm actually there's no evidence of this anywhere except for like a bunch of childhood photos. But I used to be a very competitive equestrian. I ride horses.
Oh wow.
And I'm finally getting back into it because I lived in New York, poor for years, and you can't ride horses poor in New York. You have to be incredibly wealthy.
Both of those things would make it very
Yep,
difficult. Like, you know,
yeah,
one alone is hard, but you put both of
yep.
them together.
Both together is just really untenable. And
Yeah.
in the army, I was moving around so much. So, uh, and you know, I love stage combat. I love to fight. So, like, I'd love to do some military stuff because obviously, but if it's a dream, oh yeah. I mean, I tell my manager probably once a month. I'm like, I want to be in New Zealand on a horse with a sword. That's what I want. I got a little elf vibe. We could pull it off.
I love it. Hey, I want it. Yes, there are supporters for that out in
Thank
the
you.
world. So that would be awesome. Um, yeah, you know, it's funny because I love Lord of the Rings as well, and I think that one of the things that's fascinating to me sometimes is that when you get to kind of live in these worlds for an extended period of time, you either get to bring some of the stuff with you, like you're talking about out with the equestrian, but you also get to take so much stuff away with you, right? Like,
Yeah.
you hear that story like about Viggo Mortensen, like connecting with the horse and then
With his
buying the
horses.
horse.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
bought
I
them.
mean, it's like
He
it's
bought two
stuff
of
like
them.
that. Yeah, it's yeah. So it's
And I think he
uh
also bought Hidalgo.
I
He's
think
bought a lot of horses
yeah.
from his,
The
his
man loves horses,
brothers.
so and good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I would love to see that. I'd be front and center for sure.
I
Another
grew up a
question.
horse girl, like on a farm, like horse girl. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like hashtag her horse girl.
Do you ever see the possibility for you getting to ride a horse in Quantum Leap?
I mean, no. I mean, well, I don't know.
I was gonna say let's
If
call
I
some
guess,
people right now.
yeah, I guess if in a very maybe in a world, if I don't know if I ever get to do a leap, maybe,
Right.
or if NBC really wants to take needless risk with their actor and give me I can start riding around there like they'll never insure that like ever. Or
No.
like, well, we could either have this scene with just me talking to Ian in the office, or we could spend way more money and take a ton of risk by putting me on a horse and then
Exactly. Why not?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know how well that one's gonna go.
But now you've put this image into my head. How would Mason feel about getting on a horse?
Oh, I think Mason would be game. Ray
Yeah.
would be game. Ray, when we did the Western episode, there was some smack talk about because I'm like clearly like Ray's very good physically. He's a phenomenal athlete. But like if you were to put us both on horses, there'd be no question. I would just mop the floor with him. And so there became like a nice little like, well, if we got to ride, what would we do? And I think he'd be game because he likes to be good at stuff, first of all.
Yeah.
So he'd make sure he was good at it, or at least good enough. Um, but yeah, I think Mace would do it. Nan would definitely do it.
Yeah.
Alice rides. She and I want to go riding at some point.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so
All
we're
right.
we're creating a little
I
little
mean,
family out here.
yeah, it should happen now. We should figure out a way for everybody to
Yeah.
just be on horses for an episode. Doug Brooks asks, what decade would be your favorite to actually observe as a hologram?
American decade.
Sure. We'll narrow it down a little
I
bit.
think the revolution would be
Ooh.
phenomenal. I think that'd be super, super cool. I think,
Yeah.
and again, we're in a place that we could do it, which is amazing.
Right.
If we're talking about old Europe, like, different answers.
Sure. Sure.
Sure. Victoria's reign was pretty cool. There's a couple.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in the American decade, like during the American Revolution, would be a really cool thing to explore.
Yeah, that would be really cool. The classic series. There's an episode where Sam leaps into like his great great grandfather in the Civil War.
Right.
But in the novel range, there's a novel where he leaps into an ancestor in the time of the American Revolution.
Yes.
Obviously, the canonicity of the novels is up for debate. But that being said, I would love to see something like that. That would be super cool. And I think that the show, in my opinion, my humble opinion anyway, that I think the show's primed for stuff like that because we've gotten so many episodes where we've had the opportunity to do some of the lower key leaps and that sort of stuff. And yeah, I mean, going big, right? But it's always time and money, I suppose, right? So
It's time and money, but I feel like you could do it for not that expensive.
right.
Like I feel like there's ways to do it. It's just if you notice there tends to be a pattern. The bigger the leap, the less um other story going on. Like for example, the Koreatown leap, that
Mm-hmm.
was the start of the show.
Right.
And Magic's kind of journey there. So, it would have to be one of those. We'd have to go big, but it'd be cool.
Yeah. I would love it. There was that show on AMC not that long ago called Turn, Washington Spies. I don't know if you're
I
familiar
haven't
with
seen
it or
it
not,
now.
but to me that would be a really cool kind of almost template in a way because it's the opportunity to tell some smaller stories against that larger backdrop while having lots of
Totally.
intrigue and that sort of stuff without necessarily having to like show a battle or whatever.
Yeah, I
Um,
get it. The revolution's happening.
right. Let's do it. And you know, I thought of something actually that I wanted to ask you earlier. Going back to some of the more emotional stuff, it's fascinating to me because, you know, there's that story about in the classic series in the episode MIA where Dean has this, you know, really big, heavy scene talking about Beth being the only woman that he ever loved, and afterwards, Deborah told me on the show a couple of weeks ago that she went up to him and she was like, "Oh, Dean, I have to write more stuff like this for you. You're so good at it." And Dean was like, "Please don't," because he just didn't want to have to go there if he didn't have to. And so I can imagine that, yeah, having those moments like you were talking about, kind of the, you know, I don't want you to be my hologram anymore. See, it's like, I don't want to do that again.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough. But my character the whole first season, you know, was very emotionally involved, which,
Absolutely.
you know, I think some people loved and some people didn't, understandably. Like, Dean got to play a little bit. He cared and he, you know, wanted to help Sam the whole time. But because he wasn't as emotionally invested, there wasn't a relationship or, you know, like there, he got to kind of be on the sidelines a bit more and just observe,
Right.
and talk some smack and have some, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
not show
Yeah.
up and be drunk and things like that, where, you know, that would be ridiculous if Addison did that. Like
Right.
absolutely ridiculous. Uh, um, so, you know, I was very involved in that side too, but the conflict wasn't really happening between us. It was happening around us. And now the conflict is between us,
Yeah.
which changes the dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think is just indicative of how smart the 3 year time jump and everything that happened
Very
as a
smart.
result of that was, because it's to me it's more engaging, you know. And as someone who enjoyed season one quite a bit, like I just think season two has been such a jump up in so many ways because of that, which has been really really cool. Let's see here. Wow, Audra asked quite a few questions. All right, Audra, we got time. Let's see here. Caitlin, as an actor who has been working on a series for 2 seasons and experienced many unusual hurdles, strikes, etc., how many episodes do you think is the sweet spot for a series, considering cast, schedule, writing arcs, and viewing reception? That's actually a really great question. It's kind of
It's a
fascinating.
phenomenal question.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think 18 felt like a good season. I
Mm-hmm.
think at the end of that, we were, you know, that's when we were like, okay, I think this is about the time, you know, I think old network television went 20, 21, 22.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the highest that, you know, going in a row. Um, should kind of span out, but it depends, right? Because we shoot 8-day episodes, right? Like Game of Thrones couldn't have shot 26 episodes straight. That's insane. They,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like they spent months on an episode and it was all kind of block shot and all those things. So it depends, I think, what you're on, but I do feel like for the network dramas, you know, somewhere between 15 to 20 feels like a really nice sweet spot for like a season.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. How do you you don't have to answer this question, but I am curious. How do you feel about 13? If you know, if 13 is all you get for season two, how do you feel about that?
You know, I think it's short, but I think I in the context of where we are in the industry, how many people have lost their shows, how many people shot shows and they just got thrown out because they don't have time.
Yeah.
It's, you know, at this point, I'm grateful we're at 13 based on the reality of the world we're in. Um, in a perfect world, I would have loved to go longer. I think the writers would have too. I think the
Yeah.
writers had a hard time wrapping us up in that. And they're still kind of trying to fine tune all that. But uh, yeah, so that would be my answer. 13 is a little short, but at this point, you know, and where we are, I'm very grateful that we have it.
Absolutely. Um, just out of curiosity, how many of the episodes have you, the scripts for episodes have you seen thus far?
I've only seen the next one so
9. Okay.
far.
Cool. Cool.
Mhm.
Cool. Cool. I haven't seen any. But um, no, I agree with you, and I think that obviously it's been difficult for I think fans, and I've certainly seen this in Quantum Leap. I've seen it in Star Trek. I've seen it other places where people are, you know, understandably like they want to watch their shows. I get that, but at the same time, as long as you understand that in the context of, yeah, and the people want to be making them, great, you know. But if you can't necessarily understand that part of it, it's like, well, you know, slow your roll. It's going to be okay. We'll get there. But you know, I guess kind of speaking to that a little bit more, um, how are you feeling about things now that, you know, the strike has ended and you can get back to work, and you know, what was that like for you, especially, you know, starting on a TV show, right? And it's like the first thing that you've done pretty much, and then all of a sudden, bam, this happens.
At this point, it's par for the course. I also graduated theater school in 2020, so not the best time to graduate from theater school.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, so at this point, like my experience in this industry has been it doesn't exist, and then it does exist, and then it doesn't exist, and then so like this is just reality for me. Everyone keeps telling me it's crazy, but it's one of those things where if things are always crazy, then that's just how it is.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, it's nerve-wracking, exciting, terrifying, hopeless, hopeful, all at the same time, depending on what time of day you're in.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that I'd mentioned before to someone is that that this whole time I all I had been thinking is like, you know, I hope that they're doing okay. And I hope that, you know, that they can get back to work, because it was evident from the conversations that I had with people, you know, prior to the strike, and, you know, during interviews for the first season, just how much fun you all were having and how passionate you were about the show. And I've talked to a couple of people since then that have just been very honest and been like, it's not like that on every show. Like, we are very, very lucky. So I'm glad that, you know, that you can get back at it.
We're excited.
um the Let's see here, I do have another question here. um Oh, this is from Audra again, and this is another great question. We kind of talked about some of the stuff a little bit. Do you have any relationship dynamics you want Quantum Leap to explore, like Magic's kids, Jen's family, more business or government involvement with the project?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, Deborah talks about it all the time. Like this is the thing that can take Quantum Leap into the Star Trek world where you can really start to explore families and generation. Like there's so much to explore here. It's just about having the time to do it. I
Yeah,
want to know so much more about Jen. I think Nan Marissa
me
is
too.
so talented and is such a force. And as soon as she's on screen, you're like, what is she up to? There's just, you know what I mean? There, you can't take your eyes off of her. And I want to know, like, I want to know what's going on with her and her dad. I want to know if
Yeah,
she's dating someone. I want to know the last person that she kicked to the curb, most likely. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to know so many things. I want to know what's going on with Magic's kids. I want to know, obviously, like, he's with Beth now, which is so
yeah,
cool. Like, how's that working? Um, uh, uh, Ian and Rachel, there's lots going on. Like, I, when it comes to like relationships and places and broader ways to take this, there's so many options available. It's just if we're going to have the time and the seasons to do it in, but
yeah,
hopefully we will.
absolutely. Which is a great reminder for people to watch and stream
Please watch.
Quantum
Don't
Leap
save
as
it
much
up.
as you possibly can.
Yeah, please watch. Don't.
Yeah.
I'll talk to people and they're like, "Oh, I'm saving it up." I was like, "Oh, are you?
Yeah.
What are you saving it for?
Yeah. Why?
What are you saving
Why?
it for?" It's in my own family. They're like, "Well, I'm saving it." I'm like, "No, you're watching it. Is what you're doing."
Yeah. Yeah. Because those streaming numbers help. There's no doubt about that. But
Of
it's, you
course,
know, watch it live. Watch it live.
watch it.
Um, it's the only way to experience a show. Oh, this is another great question. This is from Lisa too over on Twitter. How difficult was it to go from being excited that Ben would be home to finding out that Addison had a new beau only a few days later, or you know, however long it was, from, you know, from shooting 118 to 202, basically? Like,
I
what was
know, and
that like?
118 was like 2 Addisons dealing with Bens. Like
Yeah.
I got 2 version of this of the relationship in that. Um, it was jarring. It
Hmm.
felt like cheating. Like, it didn't feel good. You know what I mean? I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay." But, then, you meet Peter and he's wonderful and just an incredibly, um, tuned in actor, which is so great. So, it was exciting to, like, feel what a different dynamic felt with, like, a different person in a different environment, but it was as jarring as you think it would be,
Yeah.
to
Oh.
be so focused on somebody for a season and then just, "Hey."
Right, right. Was it difficult for you at all? Like, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, and especially in 206, I will be honest, I had a little difficulty kind of adjusting to Tom early on. And it wasn't because I had issues with Addison moving on. I completely understood that, and I was excited to kind of see, what that meant for the character and certainly for the dynamics with Ben. But for whatever reason, just the character of Tom, I had a hard time at first. But after 206 especially, I was just sort of like, oh, there you are. Like, I'm all in. And I'm just curious, like, for you as an actor, was there any kind of like, was there anything you had to do to prepare yourself? Was it just as simple as like meeting Peter and being like, oh yeah, we got this? Or was there anything that kind of felt like an obstacle for you just as an actor to be able to engage with this new character due to the circumstances?
Yeah, to a certain extent, because, I remember Dean kind of pseudo apologizing for it in the sense that, like, Tom and Addison never got a scene outside of HQ or Ben, really, other
Uh-huh.
than, when he told me that Ben was back, um, when I was at the gun range. So, and, so it became Ben right away. We didn't get to see a lot of Tom and Addison. Um, so it wasn't until really 6, I think, where we got to see more of their relationship, and I
Yeah.
wasn't having to be in the leaps with Ben, so I think the focus could shift a little bit more, and we got to see a bit more of the relationship, which is, I think, why you start to warm up to him, because you understand why it's happening. But I feel like for a bit, Tom suffered from what we kind of all had to deal with in season 1, which is getting dropped in the midst of the Ben bomb,
Hmm.
like, instead of existing outside of that at all.
Yeah. That's a really, really great point. And yeah, I mean, 206 for so many reasons, I think just really helped me to connect with the character more. And one of the scenes that I loved, and it's indicative of something that I think we've gotten to see from Addison just a little bit more this season already, really, than we got to see in season 1, is her sense of humor. There's that wonderful moment where Tom is like, "This is a very bad idea," and you're like, "No, this is a terrible idea." And it's just like little moments like that. There was, in 204, there was the moment where, Ben is like kind of ignoring you and going off to stop the wedding, and you have this great line. I don't want to paraphrase it or butcher it, so I'm not going to. But like, how does it feel to have maybe a little bit more opportunity to get into the humor of Addison, and have Addison have a sense of humor about all of this, whereas it did feel in season 1 it was very much, she's frustrated, she's angry, she's sad, there's all these other things kind of going on, whereas in this season it feels like you're allowed to have a little bit more of a sense of humor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think a couple things happened. I mean, I feel like we saw glimpses of it in season 1, but by season 2, Ben knows how to do leaps. We're
Mm.
much less concerned every episode that Ben's not gonna make it through this somehow.
Right.
Um, and so I think that allows for all of the characters to be a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
Um, and because Ben remembers everything, you don't feel like you have to have kid gloves on the whole time. You can kind of speak freely a little bit more. And how you have to deal with somebody when you're in a relationship with them and things are stressful is different than how you would get to maybe treat, like, imagine Ian and Addison in a leap. Exactly. Do you see what I mean? All
Yeah.
they
Oh
would
yeah.
do is talk crap to each other, because that's within the relationship dynamic, and nobody, like, we don't, that thing that you have to do when you're in a relationship of, like, okay, we have to, let's, we're, none of that has to happen. We
Right.
can just, you know what I mean? We can just completely mess with each other or just disagree about everything, and that's fine. No,
Right.
like no one expects us to do anything different. Um,
You're not trying to make things okay. You're not
you're not
trying to
trying to
like,
make things
yeah,
okay. Where Addison constantly had to try to make things okay, and because she didn't have the decision power in anything, in what he actually did in the leaps, because he can do whatever he's going to do. I can't
sure.
physically do anything about it. And in the more general esoteric sense of like she didn't choose to leap, he chose, you know, like, so just her ability to affect the outcome, you know, wasn't is strong, which I think, like, you know, if you want to get past me and I don't want you to get past me, and then I just sit here like, okay, try and get past me, like now all of a sudden we have something, because I'm standing on my own 2 feet too, where it that's not how the dynamic was so much.
Yeah.
um so, you know, again, and we learned that, right, which is why I think using other people in the leaps works. Not only
Mm-hmm.
are you showcasing the cast better, who deserve so much more screen time, but also it's fun to watch the dynamic shift. Jen brings
Yeah.
a completely different thing than Ian brings, which brings a completely different thing than Magic brings. It's just different.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things that about 206 that I loved too is that, you know, we'd seen Jen obviously as the observer before in Ben Song for the Defense, but now getting to see her again under these circumstances, it really does. It feels a lot like what you're saying is that, yeah, there's this, it's kind of like Ben's got this, like there's more confidence in Ben, and there's less this sort of like, you know, what happened, why isn't he home yet, how do we bring him home, how do we, I mean, certainly that's still kind of all there, right? Like
Of
it's not like
course.
everybody's just sort of like giving up and like, nah, just let him leap forever.
He's
But
fine.
yeah, he'll be fine. I mean, he did make it through one whole leap all by himself, so
Yes, he did.
clearly. uh, but no, I just have loved seeing that a lot as well, and I think that what you had mentioned earlier, yeah, I mean, Narissa is just so much fun and has such a different presence and dynamic. And I mean, there were so many like laugh out loud moments with her as the observer in 206 because, you know, just the way that she was reacting to the, you know, to the world around her. And then of course you see Tom in there, and like when he tries to shake Ben's hand, not once but twice, mind you, like it's little stuff like that. But one of the things that also kind of sold me on Tom, just to go back to that for a moment, that I really loved is that it felt like, in spite of this tension and in spite of Ben justifiably not wanting to work with this guy at all, that Tom was still there to advocate for Ben as best he could, you know, like, I'm here to do this job. And I love that it kind of, for me anyway, it really helped to, I never thought this to begin with, to be completely honest, but it helped to kind of put to rest what I was seeing a lot from people talking about how, you know, Tom's a bad guy and Tom's going to be a bad guy and that sort of stuff. And again, without giving anything away, without spoiling anything, I am kind of curious what your thoughts are on, you know, on people who are insistent on Tom being some sort of, you know, Machiavellian mastermind bad guy here to, like, you know, ruin everything.
I mean, maybe he is. I haven't read the rest of the scripts. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting played. But I think, you know, I think also we taught people to look for that in
Sure.
season one with Georgina's character Janice, and you know what I mean, and Leaper X, and there was always a plotty plot, like,
Right.
um and also Peter's look. I don't think that's
Well, and he came off of, I believe he had just played like a villain as well, so
I
that's
think he
probably
did,
part of
yeah,
it.
for a
Yeah.
second. So yeah, it's, you know, he's not Ben, strike one.
Right.
He's new, strike two.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And he's like, you know, dark and mysterious. Strike
And
three.
he has
He's Ben.
facial hair,
He was
so
quick, get him out of there.
yeah.
But I don't know. I haven't read the rest of the script, so they might be fooling all of us.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like, who knows, right? I mean, that has got to be an interesting experience because I mean, to have already had like 6 episodes or 8 episodes, excuse me, 8 episodes, like kind of in your back pocket, like you knew where that story was going for those eight episodes. And now to be in a situation where it's like, okay, here's 9, it's like, where are the rest of them? Like, there's got to be, even though that's not how it normally is either, there has to be a little bit of an idea of just sort of like, I should know the whole story by now because it's been so long since we did 8.
Yeah, but things have to get final approval and things can change. And I know I know where we're going ish,
Yeah.
but it,
You can
things
tell me if
change.
you want.
I cannot, Sam.
I'm sorry.
hmm The
Um,
NBC, I'm going to go to NBC jail, is what I'm going to do.
no, I don't want that. I don't want you to
Thank
get in
you.
trouble. They can, if I get in trouble, that's one thing, but I don't want you to get in trouble. So here's something from Comforted by Fiction over on Instagram, and they asked, this is very interesting actually. If Quantum Leap could cross over with another show, what
hmm
show would you want Quantum Leap to cross over with?
Does it have to be on NBC?
I'm going to say no. It does not. Any show.
Good answer. Lord of the Ring. No, I'm kidding. um, oh, well, I mean, there's so many good ones. Doctor Who.
That would
Doctor Who.
be
It has to be Doctor Who.
awesome. Right?
Like, I want to see Ben and Doctor Who duke it out for who gets to save the day. That's what I want. That would be so fun. And then like the two like observer helper. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The companion and oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
that would be awesome. I would love
Yeah.
that. Although
That's
I
good.
do have to admit that I now have this urge for some reason to see Ben as a dwarf. So there is
Thank
that
you.
as well
That's fun.
in
That
Lord of
works
the
for
Rings,
me.
right? I mean,
Mhm.
either way.
I'll be the
Uh,
elf on the
yes.
horse, on the beautiful white horse, and it's all sexy and gorgeous, and he's got
Right.
like this a beard and a
Yep.
helmet. Yeah, that's good.
um so I think I might have gotten through all the questions that we had delivered to us by the fantastic listeners and folks who are excited about this.
Aw.
But I just want to double check. um yeah, I think that one of the things that's been kind of interesting about this season too, is that there the reactions to Addison from the first season have obviously shifted so much, and all of that has to do obviously with the fact that this relationship is now over, and she has moved on, which of course I think is makes total sense. How tuned into you are these reactions, and what have been some of your thoughts and feelings on those reactions?
I mean, they took a risk. They took a risk. Uh, I get a lot of this stuff from the first season, right? Like the relationship had its own things that created a dynamic. And then now there's a lot of people who, really warmed up to me in the first season that I'm now on their shit list. Which I get. You know what I mean? Like I think
Sure.
that's a testament to like how much they believed in the relationship. And so I think you want people to be a little peeved at you when you change the dynamic. Um, I just, I think at least by the end of the season, I will have hopefully won them back over. But it's we all have our parts to play.
That's a very diplomatic answer.
Mhm.
Um, one of the things that's interesting, speaking of parts to play, going back to the very first episode, we got the information that Addison is supposed to have been the Leaper initially. When you got to shoot the scenes where you're going through the testing, you're in the Fermi suit, all that sort of stuff. What was it like? And I think in a way, it probably had to be beneficial that 118 had been shot so recently because you'd been kind of past Addison already. But
Yeah.
what was it like to kind of simultaneously almost be 3 years in the future Addison that we're getting ready to see, in 202, while having just been, present day Addison, if you will, in 118, as well as past Addison, and now you're past Addison again. What was it like to kind of, be in that situation where it's like, oh, I'm going to be a Leaper, but you're not, and kind of be in the past again, as opposed to being, in this new chapter?
Honestly, it's some of my favorite things that I've gotten to shoot has been past stuff,
Yeah.
past Addison, when I got to do that because again, you got to see who she was outside of the house being on fire, outside
Yeah.
of the love of her life ripping through space and time. Out, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to see, and I think her personality gets to shine through a little bit more. Her jokes get to shine, like all of these things start to kind of come across more because um she's more in her element. Like, she's still on the
Yeah.
train before the crash. So, um, it was honestly, it was fun and empowering, and it reminded me who she was before everything went wrong. And I think I honestly think playing past Addison made me play present Addison better because I got to know more about her, who she was before her life exploded.
Yeah, that's a really interesting answer because it is evident, and thinking about in particular the way that she relates to Ben, especially in that flashback that I'm talking about that was in 201, because in 118, like obviously things are weird because it's not that Ben, it's future Ben, and so that dynamic was a little off. But seeing that scene in 201, especially the that the flirtatiousness, the idea that these are two people who are not yet like in love, certainly not engaged, but obviously attracted to one another and obviously have this relationship with one another. It was really, I don't know, it was great to see, and I'm so glad that those scenes got put into the episode, because it really did give us a wonderful, I think, window, like you're saying, into what Addison was like before all this shit happened.
Mhm.
In 118, one of the things that I also thought that was very interesting is that you get to kind of be a little bit more action oriented for a moment there, and obviously we saw a little bit of that at the beginning of 202 when you're on the gun range. I mean, given your own personal experience, your own military experience, and that sort of stuff, do you have a desire to be maybe a little bit more action oriented?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It just grounds me.
Yeah.
It makes a lot more sense when you're doing something than when you're just s- standing and someone else is doing something.
Mm,
Um, it's just, you know what I mean? I don't know how to explain it. It's just when you're there, but you're not really there. It's sometimes you don't know what to do with your hands really. Um,
sure. Yeah.
quite literally.
Yep.
Uh, but when you're dropped in and you're in the middle of something, it helps a lot, and I also think it plays to some of my personal strengths of, I love working out, I'm very physical, so that's just something that plays to my strengths, I think, a
Mm,
bit. And I'd love, if we could figure out a way to work that in the show, but it's just the time of it is a bit hard.
sure.
So we'll see.
Well, kind of the next logical question is, do you want to leap?
I think everybody on the show wants to leap. It's not called quantum not leaping, but I think it's reality is just is I don't know how they would do that.
Sure.
But who knows? I mean, they broke the rules once, they can do it again.
Look, I'm just saying that Janice needs to come back from the NSA
That's right.
and help to devise a way to send other people out just for
Hmm.
targeted missions and bring them back,
Yeah.
even if we're unable to get Ben back or Sam back
Hmm.
at this point.
Something. Something.
Uh, so speaking of getting Sam back, I think I've obviously been able to talk to, like, Drew and Dean a little bit about this, but I'm curious, from an actor's perspective, the opportunity to have Scott come back to the show, to get Sam back in the show. How do you feel about that?
I would love Scott to come back to the show. I think for me personally, I can speak for everybody. It so much of the love for the show and the reason you do this, not, I mean, I think you like our show too, but there's a lot of other fans out there that would love to see that continued and see what happened to him,
Yeah.
because I mean, you bring him back, we're not just talking bring him back for a second. Like, there's so much you can do with him. Where has your life been? What can he bring to the program?
Yeah.
What has he been working on for all these years? Has he come back? And we didn't, like, you know, like there's so many ways to do that. Um, I would love him back. I hope he considers it. I hope they can figure it out. But I also understand that there's a lot of big moves that would have to happen to make
Sure.
that happen. And I respect, I respect Scott very much, and that he's going to need certain things, and he was the lead of the show, and Ray's the lead of this show. So we're going to have to figure that out in a way that's right, because Ray shouldn't lose his show.
Right.
Uh, but but I do hope the fans get what they've held on for so long for. I
Yeah.
hope Scott can show some mercy. But I respect the man. He's a very bright man. He's had a phenomenal career. So if it works for him, it works for him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer, and for me personally, I feel very similarly. I mean, in my head, I certainly have a thought of how I would like to see, not like a storyline, like I don't necessarily like nothing like that, but certainly, like you were saying, have him back for a little while, not just like a scene or an episode or
No,
whatever.
bring
Like
him back.
you gotta bring him back. But
Bring him back.
there's
Yeah.
so many moving pieces, right? I mean, there's so many things that go into that, and I think that for me personally, the show has gotten to a point that I mean, I don't even think about that when I watch the show. I'm always grateful as a fan of the classic series when he's referenced, or when something from the classic series is referenced. But I love the show so much on its own,
Hmm.
and what everyone's doing. I'm curious, to that point, do you ever feel like, have you ever felt like, oh, I wish we were just our own thing, and like a total reboot, as opposed to being connected to the classic series? Or do you see that as being an asset?
I think it's both. I
Mm,
think obviously it's a huge asset in the fact that there were people that were more willing to stick with us a little longer because they were fans of the original. Um, I also think it created a situation where there were some certain expectations that weren't met, and
sure.
in particular, those expectations weren't met by me. So I do think I took, a good amount of the beating there. But it's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's a tough world. Get a helmet. But you know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. But uh for the most part, the fans of this franchise are kind fans, which is not the truth for a lot of franchises out there.
Right. Right.
So, you know what I mean? Even the people that I disappointed, they didn't send dead animals to my house, which is nice. Um,
It's very true.
yeah. Um, and and what's cool about it is there's always potential. Like Deborah always talks about, there's ways to take the show in multiple directions. So
Yeah.
that's cool.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that, let me just say, and certainly I don't speak for everyone, but my interpretation is it was it was not so much you that people had a problem with, as much as they just didn't have what they expected, which
They
was
didn't have what they
Al,
expected, which is Al.
and
Yeah.
it was odd for me. It was always odd for me. I mean, you can go back and listen to the episodes even before the show premiered, and I was saying things at the time even about how I didn't want that again. That we got Sam and Al. I didn't want Sam and Al again, and maybe it's just the romantic in me or whatever. I was intrigued by the idea of having this couple, of having these people, and it just added a different element. And I think that the wonderful thing is that with the changes that have been made to the show going into season 2, in my opinion, it's made that even better, because I kind of to take it one step further, you mentioned earlier about, someone you love. Obviously, you don't have what Addison and Ben had without still feeling for them, having love in your heart for them. I am curious as to what your interpretation, as much as you can say anyway, what your interpretation is of Addison's feelings for Ben at this particular point in time, even though she has moved on with Tom.
I think he's the person that she would have had the best life with. but they just missed.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And there's those people. There's those people that you were this close with, but then circumstances changed and then you made different commitments, and someone else shouldn't be broken apart just because they're not, you know, the one, or maybe they should, I don't know, but I think that's what it is. It's one of those things where I don't think she feels any less for him.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes the ship moves forward, and as previously mentioned, life's tough. Get a helmet.
Right, well, I have to go cry in my shower now.
Sorry.
But,
Sorry, but I do have to go soon. I know there was a couple wrap ups, so
that's totally fine. No worries. I completely understand, and I really appreciate. I'm so grateful for the time that you've shared with me. I just have two more things. I mean, one, I think that's incredibly beautiful what you said, and I think that the idea that that yes, it sometimes you move on, but that doesn't negate what was shared with the person before, and I think that that's so important, and I think that it just adds so much. It adds a whole new dynamic to that story. I do have one last question, actually, from a longtime listener, first time caller, Mr. Drew Lindo.
Oh, this guy.
As he wants to know the favorite scene that you have filmed.
Nothing he wrote.
Especially all those times he makes Ben kiss somebody in front of Addison.
Yeah. When I saw the script for 6, I think the first thing I did was call Drew and be like, "Oh, really? So he's just out here kissing people now?" Okay. Drew. What's my favorite scene that I've shot?
Yeah.
Oh man, he would. I mean, I think it was the date in 118.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I got to play 2 characters, so yay me. And second of all, I got to be the Addison version, living in this present, falling in love with somebody, and also the Addison version. And I did get to play with him in that because we were more safe. I got to mess with him and kind of needle him a bit and keep him on track. But I also got to be the Addison that fell in love with Ben because you watch how he made you fall in love with him in the first place, and you get to watch it again, and he's doing it again, but this time even more complicated. And I think it was funny and it was heartfelt, and just that entire sequence from date to he tells me he's a time traveler and I laugh at his face and say it's the plot, like the whole thing, just something about it felt like Ben and Addison's quantum leap.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I love that answer. And Drew didn't write it. So
Margarita wrote that. But I love Drew's scripts. They're very good.
They are. No, they're fantastic. And this last one, Secret History, was just so good. So good.
And he has to make the episode where Ben kisses another girl like an awesome episode. Couldn't you make it like a mid-episode?
If we could just make Hannah less likable, I think.
Yeah, could we make her a little uglier? Like, she has to be this gorgeous, charismatic sweetheart of a human being. I'm like, I met Eliza. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, I can't say anything else right now at the risk of spoilers, but what I will say is thank you so much. You are
my God,
amazing.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. You're welcome anytime. And I can't wait to share this with everyone. But yeah, thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you're going to get back to work on the show, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. And yeah, you've just been amazing. I've loved doing this, and I can't wait to do it again.
Thank you. Absolutely. Welcome back anytime.
Awesome. Well, take care of yourself. Leapers, we're going to get out of here. Stick around. I'll have a few comments afterwards. But once again, give it up wherever you are. If you're in your car, if you're sitting at your desk at work, if you're behind your computer, just a little round of applause. Big round of applause. And we'll be back real soon. Thanks so much.